The music world can be a turbulent one at times, given the amount of touring musicians do, and the massive amount of fame that they achieve when they become successful. It comes as no surprise then that some musicians are the focus of strange and unsolved mysteries that often seem too bizarre to be true. Number 10. During their heyday, Grateful Dead, a rock band that was formed in California in the mid-1960s, was seen as revolutionary in the music world, since they blended many different genres of music in their songs. They even vowed to never play the same set list twice, though this has happened an estimated 5 times, which given their longevity is still a remarkable feat. Many of their songs included elements of folk music, jazz, and psychedelic rock, and in a very short time they amassed a huge following of fans. These fans became known as Deadheads, many of whom followed the band around the country while they toured, and in some instances even followed them abroad. But throughout the years, some of the band's fans have either lost their lives or gone missing without explanation. And in many of these cases, investigators were unable to find a culprit or locate those who disappeared. The first of these cases is thought to have occurred in 1986, when 2 fans, 22-year-old Mary Joya and 18-year-old Gregory Niffet, attended a Grateful Dead concert, after which they drove back to Rainbow Village, a camp that gave shelter to the homeless. Unfortunately, they were found deceased in the San Francisco Bay a short while later, having had their lives ended with a firearm. After a thorough investigation, a 32-year-old man named Ralph Thomas was arrested and given the death penalty. But this conviction was overturned when a judge found out that several other fans had seen the couple arguing with another man over an object that he was holding in his hand. It's thought that this was Thomas's firearm that had been stolen earlier. Then, in 1990, 20-year-old Doug Simmons went to a Grateful Dead concert in Raleigh, North Carolina. He was last seen on the 10th of July, just before the show was set to begin, and after he told one of his friends that he no longer felt like going, given the amount of illegal substances that he saw. 6 days later, a witness told the police that they'd spoken to a man who looked like Doug, and that he couldn't remember his own name, but he did recall that he was from Florida. Doug was never seen again. In 1991, a woman was found deceased in the woods in Warren County. Investigators found that she only had one identifying feature, a tattoo of a tiger on her left leg. Upon closer investigation, it was found to be the same design as the tiger on Jerry Garcia, the band's frontman's guitar. 2 years later, Mitchell Fred Weiser and his girlfriend, Bonita Bickwig, decided to hitchhike to a Grateful Dead concert, but it isn't known if they ever made it there, as they went missing and were never seen or heard from again. In 1995, a man was found deceased in Atlanta by the side of the road. Many sources state that the road was filled with Grateful Dead fans who were leaving a concert, but others state that there'd been a basketball game in the stadium that night, and that Jerry Garcia had performed with the band Kiss. The deceased man was never identified. That same year, 2 men lost their lives inside a Volkswagen van when they were involved in a crash. Only one of the men could be identified, while the only other clue to the other man's identity was the fact that he was wearing one of the band's shirts. Then, in 1996, 23-year-old Bridget Pendell Williamson decided to follow the band while they were touring. Her life had been steadily going backward due to addiction, and while on the road she went missing and was never found. In 2008, a set of remains were found hidden under a box spring in Sacramento. It was determined they'd been there for about 4 years, and the woman to whom they belonged became known as Delta Jane Doe. She was eventually identified as Shannon Vilguth, who was found wearing a Grateful Dead jacket. Though the band obviously had nothing to do with these cases, they've become synonymous with the group and continue to intrigue current fans of the band today. Number 9. John Lee Curtis, better known to his fans as Sonny Boy Williamson, rose to prominence in the blues scene in the 1940s as one of the greatest harmonica players the genre had ever seen, though he was also hailed for his talent for songwriting and singing. He'd started playing the harmonica when he was just 11 years old, after receiving one as a Christmas gift, and he immediately started teaching himself how to play. As an adult, he married a woman named Lacey Bell Davidson, and soon he'd written a series of hit songs including Bluebird Blues and Sugar Mama Blues. But on the 1st of June 1948, Williamson played a show at the Plantation Club in Chicago, after which he headed home. But he never made it there, as he was found deceased the following morning. The official report stated that he'd been assaulted and robbed, but many people feel that there was likely another, more sinister motive for the crime. Furthermore, reports of the investigation were vague at best, leading many people to speculate that something untoward was being covered up. But of Williamson's fellow musicians, William "Billy Boy" Arnold claimed to have seen what actually happened and confirmed that a cover-up was taking place. He stated that Williamson did indeed leave the club, but instead of going home, he headed to someone's house, where people were gambling and drinking whiskey. According to Arnold, Williamson did well and won a large amount of money from what he described as dangerous people. The owner of the house became upset, and after getting a few friends to back him up, demanded that Williamson return the money that he'd won. But they ended up taking him home, and his wife would later state that Williamson told her he'd won more money that night than he ever had in his entire life, but he no longer had it with him. She then helped him upstairs, after which he lost consciousness. He was rushed to a hospital but passed away the following morning. The people responsible for his life being ended were never identified. But this wasn't the last time that Williamson would be involved in a mystery. In 1941, a musician named Rice Miller, along with guitarist Robert Lockwood, caught the eye of executives from the Interstate Grocery Company. They were then given the opportunity to perform on the King's Biscuit Time radio show, and in return they were allowed to promote the shows they were playing elsewhere. It was then that Rice decided to adopt the name Sonny Boy Williamson. Some people believe that the owner of Interstate Grocery Company, Max Moore, decided that this would be a good idea, since he could then promote the products in his store to fans of blues music, though others think Rice came up with the deceitful idea on his own. Since the original Sonny Boy Williamson was already well known thanks to a string of hit songs, people were fooled into believing that it was him performing, when it was actually an imposter who'd unknowingly stolen his identity. The second Sonny Boy passed away from a heart attack on the 25th of May, 1965. Number 8. It isn't often that a song makes waves in the music world, only for it to be revealed that no one knows who the artist is. But this is exactly what happened with a song called Peanut Duck that was released in the 1980s. Back in the 80s, it wasn't uncommon for people to dance to a popular song without knowing who the artist was, since information about bands and solo artists wasn't as readily available as it is today, thanks to the internet. But those artists were always credited with creating the track, and with enough due diligence, it was possible to find out who it was that wrote a specific song. It was also common practice for DJs at the time to intentionally mislabel songs in order to keep them for themselves. But the Peanut Duck song was a different story altogether. When it first became popular, fans of the song were curious to find out who had created it, but they kept coming up short of answers whenever they tried to identify them. Then it was speculated that it was written by a woman named Marcia G. With a name finally being put to the track, fans wanted to hear more of her music, since the only song they'd heard so far impressed them. But the mystery only deepened, as no one was able to find any artist named Marcia G. No records existed of anyone by that name recording a song called Peanut Duck, and to make matters worse, there was no record of her recording any song at any point. The song was often compared to other popular pop and dance songs at the time, such as Locomotion and Chubby Checkers' The Twist. As with those songs, the lyrics of Peanut Duck introduced the listener to a new type of dance, with the words, "There's a brand new dance that's sweeping the nation. The peanut duck is a new sensation." It then gives instructions on how to do the dance. The listeners told to flap their arms and move their necks like a duck would, and hilariously, the lyrics further state that the singer of the song isn't all that good at it. Some people were also confused as to what peanuts had to do with anything in the song, since ducks aren't known to be particularly fond of them. But the song remained popular despite all of its ambiguity, and in 2005, it was included on Rhino Records' Girl Group Sounds, One Kiss Can Lead to Another compilation. With this release, the mystery behind the song became even more frustrating, since the label claimed that it wasn't actually recorded by Marcia G, and instead attributed it to a mystery singer who produced it at Philadelphia's Virtue Sound Studio. It was also explained that a British DJ stumbled upon the track one day, after which they took it back to the UK with them and released it as a bootleg track. He then came up with the name Marsha G to keep other DJs from claiming credit for it. No further proof of the original artist has ever been found, and since they've never come forward to claim it as their original work, it seems unlikely that we'll ever find out who the elusive singer was. Number 7. While most musical mysteries concern artists from pop, rock, or other modern genres, there are also some strange cases concerning classical music composers, such as Mozart and Heyday. One example of this is known as Coupeau's barricades, a phrase that has left classical music lovers baffled for a very long time, since it simply isn't known what the composer was referring to. Francois Coupeau wrote the piece, which is called The Mysterious Barricades, for the harpsichord, and it spawned many theories, including that it has something to do with the Freemasons. The piece formed part of Coupeau's so-called harpsichord parts, which he released in either 1716 or 1717, and became immensely popular thanks to its changing rhythms and intriguing harmonies, with many people stating that it reminds them of fractal mathematics. The song is a short one, coming in at just 2.5 minutes in length, and today it's often played on a piano rather than a harpsichord, mostly because it's more accessible, and since the sound of the harpsichord is somewhat outdated. The song is still seen as a masterpiece today, with some experts describing it as a heavy object that gathers pace as the music builds, only for it to lose momentum and come to a halt again against an unseen barricade. But while the music is certainly impressive, it's also known for the mystery behind its title. For centuries, people have been trying to figure out what the mysterious barricades are that Coupeau refers to, and to date, no one has been able to come up with a definitive answer. Some think that the title would have been obvious to classical music lovers at the time that the piece was released, while others believe it was meant to be enigmatic to create an aura of mystery around the music. One man has noted that many of Coupeau's pieces mention the countryside or some form of agriculture, and hence he suggests that the composer was inspired by the process of stomping grapes during the production of wine. He adds that the word barricade may refer to the barrels that the wine was made in, and the inclusion of the word mysteries may refer to the mysteries surrounding Bacchus, the Roman god of wine, agriculture, and fertility. Others have suggested that the barricades may be more romantic in nature, referring to women's eyelashes, their underwear, or even chastity belts. But these theories have been dismissed by music experts, since those items just don't fit with the music. Some classical music experts think the title may have been Coupeau's idea of a joke, and that it refers to some of the more technical aspects of the piece itself. They suggest that the suspensions in the lute style may serve as a barricade to the rest of the harmonies in the song. This is also mere speculation though, since none of the composer's other pieces make reference to their own melodies, or more technical aspects. Then there's the possibility that the barricades are represented by the bar lines on which the music is written. Furthermore, those who've learned to play the piece notice that they barely need to move their hands while performing it, and hence speculate that Coupeau was referring to the player's hands being barricaded in one place. None of these theories have been proven though, and the song remains as mysterious as it was centuries ago. Number 6. While most of us are familiar with the Rolling Stones, the British rock band that rose to fame during the 1960s, and whose music is still popular today, not everyone is aware of the fact that their lineup has seen many changes throughout the decades. While Mick Jagger and Keith Richards are undoubtedly the most famous members of the band, Ronnie Wood, Charlie Watts, and Bill Wyman, among others, also made major contributions to their sound, along with one of the band's founding members, Brian Jones. In fact, Jones was the one who conceived the band as he contacted Jagger and Richards in 1962, informing them that he was planning on forming a blues band called the Rolling Stones, a title that's derived from a Muddy Waters song. But just a few years after the band was formed, Jagger and Richards started taking control of the band's musical sound, resulting in some serious issues among its members. Less emphasis was being placed on Jones's parts, and as the years rolled on, he started drinking heavily while using illegal substances. This had a negative impact on the quality of his playing on stage and in the studio. He became completely unreliable, leaving the rest of the band with no choice but to replace him with another guitarist named Mick Taylor. In June of 1969, Jones announced that he no longer enjoyed playing the style of music that Jagger and Richards had incorporated into the band, and he could no longer see eye to eye with the rest of the band. He stuck out on his own, but just a few weeks later he was found deceased at the bottom of his swimming pool at his estate in Sussex, England, having joined the infamous 27 Club. At first, it was reported that he'd passed away due to misadventure, since it was assumed that he'd entered the water while intoxicated. This theory was bolstered by the fact that he'd held a party at his house that same evening, and that he had indeed been drinking. He was discovered just hours after the party ended, but many people who knew him disagree with the coroner's report. They made mention of the fact that a construction worker named Frank Thorogood had been doing some work on Jones's house, and that he and the guitarist had gotten into an argument about money. It's been suggested that he was responsible for ending Jones's life. There's also been speculation from Tom Keelock, the former manager of the Rolling Stones, having something to do with Jones's passing, but he passed away in 2009 without ever being formally questioned, despite being one of the first people on the scene after Jones was discovered. But before his passing, he claimed to have heard a deathbed confession from Thorogood, in which he stated that he finally snapped after yet another confrontation with Jones, though he later recanted the statement. Those close to Jones felt that the police at the time were too eager to call the case closed, and that they did investigate the incident to the extent that they should have. Sussex police did, however, state that they've investigated every report that they've received, and never felt the need to reopen the investigation. They also stated that they don't plan on reopening it anytime soon. Since many of the people who were in attendance that night have either moved on or passed away, it's unlikely that we'll ever have new information emerge, and it's equally unlikely that the case will ever be re-examined, and we may never know whether Jones simply fell into the pool, or if someone close to him was involved in his passing. Number 5. In recent times, conspiracy theorists have come up with several theories regarding some of the best-known historical figures, including suggestions that William Shakespeare didn't write all the plays attributed to him, and that certain artists aren't solely responsible for the famous paintings that they're known for. But these theories aren't just suggested by conspiracy theorists, and aren't confined to painters and authors. One of these theories has been proven as true, though it's still marred by ambiguity and concerns a piece of music written by the famous composer Mozart. It all started in July of 1791, when Mozart was nearing the end of his life. In the months prior, his health had started to fail, and when he was approached by a man who he described as a gray stranger who asked him to compose a piece of music, he became somewhat paranoid. The man told Mozart that he represented someone who wanted him to write a piece called Requiem, but added that the composer would only be allowed to write the piece on the condition that he never attempt to find out who he was writing it for. Mozart must have known that he didn't have long to live, as he considered the piece as his swan song, but he forged ahead and started the composition. He managed to complete 2 parts of the piece, the Requiem and Kyrie movements, but was thankfully able to add the voice parts and bass lines for 2 other sections. He eventually passed away in December of that year, leaving the Requiem unfinished. But the mysterious man had already paid the composer for the piece, leaving Mozart's wife, Constance, worried that he would want his money back when he found out that it was incomplete. She approached Joseph Abler and asked that he write the rest of the piece, and while he did add some music to it, one of Mozart's pupils is said to have finished the rest, since he'd received instructions from Mozart on how the piece was meant to be completed. Once the piece was finished, the pupil copied the entire score in his own handwriting, making it impossible to tell who wrote which parts. He then handed it over to the strange man who had commissioned the piece. To this day, no one is certain who this mysterious stranger was. Some think it may have been one of Mozart's greatest rivals, Antonio Salieri, while others suggest that it may have been the son of the mayor of Vienna. Number 4. Throughout the years, several songs have been given the nickname the most mysterious song on the internet, but in most of these cases, the mysteries surrounding these songs have eventually been solved. But this is not the case with a song called Like the Wind, a catchy new wave track that was uploaded to the internet with no additional information. No one knows who wrote it, when it was written, or why the artist chose to remain anonymous. Those who have heard the song describe it as akin to synth-pop songs that were released during the 1980s, and that it would have fit in with any DJ set while they were playing in nightclubs at the time. At first, the song was thought to be far younger than that, since it was first uploaded in 2007, and ever since, internet sleuths have been hard at work in an effort to track down the artist, but with little to no success. Since virtually nothing is known about the artist or the creation of the song, it's now become the latest iteration of the internet's most mysterious song, with some people spending hundreds of hours online trying to crack the mystery. It then came to light that the song was played on the radio somewhere in Europe as many as 35 years ago, and that a man only known as Darius S. managed to record it to a blank tape while he was listening to the radio in Germany sometime between 1982 and 84. Unfortunately, he didn't record the radio DJ's intro or anything after the song stopped playing, and so it isn't known which station it was played on. Darius was in the habit of recording songs off of several different stations, and can't remember which one this particular song was played on. He suggested that it was played on a show called Music for Young People, but added that he's far from confident with that theory. He stated that he'd heard the song before and decided to record it when he heard it again, but never learned who the artist was or when it was written. Darius has also speculated that the DJ simply didn't speak before the song was played, or that he may have been distracted and failed to hear the song being announced. But he's fairly confident that he recorded it in 1984, since all of the other tracks on his tape were from that year, and the cassette itself was manufactured in that same year. Darius had no intention of finding out who the song's writer was, but his sister convinced him to do so in 2007. They started searching for the song's lyrics on the internet, but made no progress whatsoever. Realizing that they were fighting a losing battle, they decided to upload a small part of the song to spiritofradio.ca, a site dedicated to synth pop. It was also added to a Canadian site that has its users identify obscure songs from the past, but no one was able to identify it, and the original artist never came forward. The same snippet was then uploaded to YouTube in 2011, but it received very little attention, and the mystery lingered on. Then a YouTube user uploaded the piece to his channel, as well as a few Reddit communities, and it became the focus of a worldwide investigation. The entire song was eventually uploaded to Reddit, sparking several different theories. Some people focused on the singer's accent, suggesting that they might hail from Germany, Poland, or Austria. Some people thought that the song may have been composed by a single person, while others were certain it had to have been the creation of a band. But one problem remained. There was no way of proving any of these theories. Even the lyrics were ambiguous. Some listeners heard the vocalist singing "Hear the Young and Restless Dreaming," while others thought that that same line was actually "Here you are under arrest for screaming." While the song has been named "Like the Wind," a phrase that's heard in its opening line, some people feel that the singer is actually saying "locked away," but it remains known by its former title for now. One DJ who worked on the show that Darius may have been listening to when he taped it has weighed in on the situation, but to no avail, as he says he has no memory of ever hearing the song or playing it on the radio. It's been suggested that it may have been hidden somewhere in his vast record collection, but he doubts this, stating that he knows just about every track on each of his records, and "Like the Wind" doesn't ring a bell in his mind. The investigation continues, and only time will tell if this mysterious song's creator will ever be identified. Number 3. When we think of ciphers, we usually conjure up images of wartime spies who are tasked with conveying secret messages to their superiors, or books written by authors such as Dan Brown, in which a cipher finally brings an end to a certain mystery. They've been used by criminals in the past, the most famous likely being the Zodiac Killer, who's yet to be identified, though many people believe Arthur Leigh Allen is the culprit, since he's the only suspect that's ever been named by the authorities. Whether the stuff of reality or fiction, one of the last places that anyone would normally look for a cipher is in a piece of music, though it's now been suggested that one of history's most famous composers, Robert Schumann, may have used them in at least one of his compositions. In the years 1834 and 35, Schumann composed a piece of pieces that made up a larger body of work called Carnival. It consisted of 21 different short pieces of music that told the tale of several masked revelers, thought to be his friends, colleagues, himself, and perhaps a few fictional characters. Though it's widely known by the title Carnival, it has a subtitle which reads Little Scenes on 4 Notes, and this is where it gets slightly complicated. The notes used in the piece are said to be the basis of a cryptogram, since they're the pitch equivalents of other notes that may or may not spell out certain words and names. The cipher is thought to go as follows. The notes A, E flat, C, and B are possibly meant to read as their pitch equivalents, A, E sharp, C, and H. This may seem even more confusing since there's no musical note of H, but it should be noted that the note B is written as H in certain European countries, one of which is Germany. The first pitch combination is A, E flat, C, and B, which, using the cipher, has been suggested to spell out the word ash, which is where Schumann's then-fiancée was born, though it's been suggested that they're meant to spell the German word for carnival. The second combination is A flat, C, and B, which spells ash. It's been speculated that this refers to the first day of Lent, known as Ash Wednesday, though these are also the letters in Schumann's middle and last names, Alexander Schumann. The third and last combination of notes is E flat, C, B, and A, which spells out Esha when the cipher is applied. While the E seems superfluous here, these letters are thought to refer to the composer's own name, the SH and A in Schumann. This is only a small part of the mystery, though some experts feel that the relation between the actual notes and supposed cipher is a mere coincidence. It should be noted, though, that several other composers, including Bach, often used similar techniques to hide messages in their compositions, and for all we know, Schubert's was also intentional. Number 2. Ludwig van Beethoven will forever be remembered as one of the most talented composers of all time, but he's also the subject of a mystery that includes a love letter written to a woman whose identity remains unknown. The letter in question was penned in July of 1812 and reads in part, quote, "My angel, my all, my own self. While still in bed, my thoughts rush to you, my immortal beloved, sometimes joyfully, other times sadly, waiting to see whether fate will listen to us. I can only live with you either completely or not at all. Ever thine, ever mine, ever us, L." In short, he often found himself lying in bed thinking of the mysterious woman, and at times it made him happy while other times it brought him sorrow, and he then ends the note by declaring his undying love for her. Since another part of this letter asks the woman to arrange for Beethoven to live with her, many people have suggested that she must have been married at the time, and hence it's been suggested that she may have been Josephine Brunswick de Corumpa, the wife of Count Dame, and one of the composer's piano students. Dame unexpectedly passed away in 1804, and it was rumored at the time that de Corumpa and Beethoven then secretly became romantically involved. But since she had 3 children with Dame, she married Baron von Stackelberg to ensure that she would keep custody of them. The marriage only lasted for 2 years, from 1810 to 1812, and it's believed that during the time when de Corumpa ended the relationship, Beethoven wrote the now famous letter to her. There's yet another mystery hidden here. De Corumpa gave birth to another child just 9 months after the Baron passed away, and she named the girl Minona. If this word is read backwards and translated to German, it means anonymous, and hence has sparked theories that Beethoven was the father, though this has never been proven. While this is currently the foremost theory regarding the letter, it's also been suggested that the woman in question is Antony Brentano, who's married to a banker but who lived in Vienna for a while after living in Frankfurt. During this time, she and Beethoven met, and soon they were seen in each other's company on a near daily basis. The letter mentions that he saw the mystery woman for the last time on the 2nd of July, 1812. It's known that he and Antony were in Prague on that very day, and 8 months later, she gave birth to a son. Many people think that Beethoven is the child's father. Furthermore, the letter mentions that the woman's name starts with the letter T, and since Antony was known to her friends as Tawny, there's a good chance that the letter was meant for her. It's also known that he gifted his song To the Beloved to Antony, But even with all of this evidence, it's impossible to prove the mystery woman's true identity. Number 1. In the 1970s, Johnny Thunders rose to prominence in the punk scene of America when he started performing as the guitarist for the band The New York Dolls. Later in his career, he would play in another band called the Heartbreakers, often called Johnny Thunders and the Heartbreakers. His fellow musicians praised his guitar playing ability and described his sound as raw and untamed. Thunders would go on to play 2 of the New York Dolls albums, but in 1975, he decided to leave the band, and then started his role as the leader of the Heartbreakers. The band saw a good amount of success and eventually toured the UK alongside famous bands including The Clash and The Damned. They remained in the UK throughout 1977, since they found a far more appreciative audience there than in the US. They only released 1 studio album though, and the following year, he recorded his solo album titled So Alone. The recording process for this album was known to involve a lot of illegal substances and alcohol, and before long, Thunders became addicted. He then moved back to the US and settled in Detroit with his wife, Julie, but continued to perform. The Heartbreakers would reunite in the 1980s and record one last live album, and during the 80s he also lived in Paris and Stockholm. He was also part of several other projects, including a cover album and a few new original songs, but his health had started to deteriorate by the beginning of 1990. On the 23rd of April, 1991, age 38, Thunders was staying in room 37 at the St. Peter House Hotel in New Orleans when he was found deceased. He was determined that he'd lost his life thanks to a cocktail of illegal substances that were supposedly found in his system, and it seemed as though he was just another rock star that had lost his life in the same way as so many others before him. But not everyone is convinced. The level of substances in his system weren't high enough to have ended his life, especially since he would have built up a tolerance over the years. Furthermore, the coroner who'd provided the report was later dismissed after it was found that he'd falsified an unrelated report. While the police stated that the illegal substances were found in the hotel, Thunders' manager stated that there weren't any at the time. He also added that Thunders' wallet and passport could not be found. Dee Dee Ramone from the band The Ramones later suggested that Thunders' life had been ended by a group of men who were after the illegal substances that he had with him. It's also been speculated that he passed away in the presence of 2 people who were in the room with him, who then stole his wallet and passport. But the mystery of his passing remains unsolved and will likely never be investigated any further. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you liked this video, be sure to hit that like button. Also, don't forget to subscribe and click that notification bell to keep up to date with all of our future uploads. But my name is Ty Knotts, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.